performed miracles really that year. We really did. We played so well.
European nights were special at Tannadice. It always seemed to bring out the best of the club, the best of the supporters.
What a wonderful performance by the crowd.
Jim McLean was a disciplinarian.
Jim was a very intense person.
Come on, get Bannon off.
He was football 100%.
With a great chance. Oh, it's a great goal.
We were always regarded as a small corner shop club, but on the pitch we were a big side.
There's Gallagher. The perfect start for Dundee United.
I think it says a lot for a provincial team like Dundee United with limited resources that we achieved what we achieved.
At the start of the 1986-87 season, Dundee United, led by maverick Jim McLean, were attempting to become the first Scottish side to win the UEFA Cup. Born in Larkhall, McLean started his football career at Hamilton Accies, but it was with Dundee, curiously enough, that the ex-joiner carved out a name for himself as a player.
And headed away on the line, McLean, Jim McLean.
In 1971, at the age of just 34, he was appointed manager of the team across the road, Dundee United. Before long, he was controlling every single aspect of the club, which led him to be described as the joiner from Larkhall who thought he was the carpenter from Nazareth.
He did control Tannadice from top to bottom. He'd be cutting the grass, he'd be fixing the door hinges, he would be, making the tea, he'd be picking the team.
He treated it like his house, basically. I think it was always turning lights off. That was another trait of his.
That was maybe one of the reasons why it was successful, because you had a man like Jim McLean at the helm who was in charge of all aspects of the club.
But what McLean did at Tannadice was nothing short of miraculous. He took United from obscurity to back-to-back League Cup triumphs, and in 1983 they won the Premier League Championship. He was wooed by Rangers as a successor to John Gregg, but he was in love with United, and what McLean wanted was a big, happy Tannadice family, as long as it was on the cheap.
Come on, shout aggressively, don't whisper.
The relationship between McLean and his players was always strict and sometimes stressed. But you know something? It worked. It really worked. McLean somehow fashioned this collection of individuals into one of the most respected teams on the continent. In October 1986, having finished third in the previous season's championship, the team found themselves in the UEFA Cup first round. United had to come from behind to beat the French side, Lens.
The goalkeeper is out. Here is Rob Wilman, and Chucky did it! Yes!
The fans and players were delirious. Wee Jim was quite pleased.
Well, he certainly had a fearsome reputation. I think the only thing that I could say about that was whatever you've heard, if you multiply it by 10, you're not even close.
Somebody round the back of Haggy!
It was just like a volcano going off and, bodies just running for cover, basically.
You could never say, like, oh, he's one of Wee Jim's favourites, or he's a favourite of Wee Jim, because everybody was treated the very same.
Headball!
And that's what I think brought the players, and as a squad, I think that brought everybody sort of closer together.
Hold that ball, don't do that! Kick it away, I'll boot you!
Wee Jim's style was to basically work his way around the team. He started at the goalkeeper, worked his way through the back four, and then came into the midfield. And usually when he came to me, he was making some point, and I would question it.
So the 10 minutes would be spent then shouting at Eamon.
Get Bannon stirred up.
And the rest is would go off scot-free, So that's why Eamon was so popular in the dressing room.
We used to have a basket, like a washing basket, that we put the shin guards in, and maybe ankle socks. And one day he came in and he kicked that, but his foot went through the basket. So he was flapping about, he had the basket stuck in his foot, flapping about the dressing room. And it was difficult not to laugh.
Aye, but no one dared. Their success wasn't restricted to Europe. McLean's bid for a happy home made for domestic bliss too, and by the end of October, his United side had gone through the first quarter of the league season undefeated. There was just one wee coupon buster. They lost to Rangers in the semi-final of the League Cup, despite the presence of 5 Scottish internationalists in the side. It's a curious thing, but until the arrival of Jim McLean, no Dundee United player had ever won a Scottish cap. David Narey was the first to dip his toe in the water.
Looks for Walk. Narey's coming through from right back.
Back on the UEFA Cup trail, Narey was in his usual place, helping the team keep a clean sheet in the second round match against Romanians Universitate Craiova.
Clark's there to goal. John Clark, 2-0.
A comfortable 3-0 win on Tayside meant that United were flying high for the away leg in Romania, and even a 1-0 defeat couldn't send them crashing out of the competition.
It's going to be a goal. It is.
But United's trip behind the Iron Curtain was memorable for more than just the football.
I don't think I've ever seen poverty like that in my whole life. I've been to Romania 3 or 4 times, but Craiova was one of the poorest parts.
And the United supporters that travelled over, I remember meeting some of them. Some of them were starving. They couldn't get food. They couldn't buy food. We went into our hotel and brought out Mars bars, and we had bottles of juice and crisps we gave to them.
As fans recovered from the Romanian ordeal, back at Tannadice the team prepared for the third round of the UEFA Cup and the visit of Yugoslavia's Hajduk Split.
There's a cross to keep it in trouble. A great chance, and it's a goal. An important breakthrough for Dundee United. Clark's there, the goal. He really biffed it. What a beautiful goal.
Jim McInally and John Clark gave the team a 2-0 lead to take into the second leg, along with supplies of juice and crisps for the fans. United rode their luck in Yugoslavia and, thanks to Split's poor finishing, escaped with a 0-0 draw. Wee Jim's men were in the hat for the quarter-finals of the UEFA Cup. Their next opponents were the richest club in Europe.
When the draw came through and everybody realised it was Barcelona, the buzz about the place was absolutely fantastic.
Terry Venable's been the manager, the English manager in Spain. It was a kind of, journalistic dream.
Visca el Barça! Gary Lineker and Mark Hughes had just gone to the club, and there was a British feel about it as well, and for to have these guys, these top superstars at the time, coming to Tannadice was something special.
The first leg was at home, and on the 4th of March, with only 2 minutes played, 20-year-old Gallagher put United ahead.
A perfect start for Dundee United!
Kevin, after the game, was asked whether he meant it or not, and he says, "Oh yeah, I meant it." And his nose went.
He must have practiced that goal he scored umpteen times in his own living room, because I certainly never seen him practicing it where I was.
To this day, no one knows if I meant it or not, and I think it's going to carry on that way as well.
Whatever the truth of the matter, United's 1-0 victory over the European giants meant the team could now look forward to the return leg at Barcelona's ground, the legendary Nou Camp, a stadium 5 times bigger than Tannadice. Whether the team had their heads turned by dreams of European glory, we'll never know. But their domestic form dipped, and in the Scottish Cup they needed a last-minute penalty to secure a replay against lowly Forfar.
Still in the cup. 2-all.
Wee Jim completely lost the plot. Drastic action was required.
That's one thing you can say about Dundee United. And Jim McLean, he tried everything. We had the dietitians long before dietitians were the in thing. We had a sports psychologist long before sports psychologists were called sports psychologists.
The psychologist that we had, it was Jack Black. She says, is there a problem? And so it ended up the root problem that the players thought at the time was Jim McLean, just his reaction after games on it. So Jack says, right, he says, that's it, I'll make sure he doesn't come in the dressing room after the game. So the boys are quite happy and everything. The boys are in the shower after the game, and who appears in the shower? Jim McLean. So you're getting the finger in the face after the game in the shower, like try to wash yourself.
Jack Black never did make the plane to Spain, and despite being 1-0 up from the first leg, no one, McLean apart, honestly believed that United would survive their visit to the Nou Camp. And the fans made the most of what they thought would be their last overseas adventure of the season by soaking up the Spanish culture.
We actually trained on the stadium outside the Nou Camp, which was a 25,000 seated stadium, which I think the reserves playing. So that was bigger than Tannadice itself.
The swimming pool in the dressing room that was bigger than Dundee swimming pool. Everything was bigger than big.
We had a wee ribbon to a couple of the Barcelona players because they had to go in a church chapel and pray with them into the priest before the game.
Going down the tunnel to your right hand side was a chapel, and I think 1 or 2 went in, but the majority didn't.
I must confess, I went to chapel myself, but Jim McLean ordered us. It was one of these ones, all the Tims, get yourself into the chapel.
It is a bit intimidating, I suppose, when you walk onto the Nou Camp. You actually come up from a lower level, so when you reach the playing field, you sort of step out. It's like stepping out into some sort of coliseum.
The Nou Camp could hold 80,000, 90,000. There was 42,000 there. You got a row each. Everybody thought Dundee United they'll get annihilated here.
They put the Dundee United supporters on the far side. They were up in the top, they were up in the gods, and we must have looked like Saputo men to them, to be honest.
We make it exactly 5 minutes to half time.
Unfortunately, they got the goal that levelled the game, and the atmosphere was electric. I mean, that 40,000 sounded like the stadium was full.
At half-time, the tie was level at 1-1, and United were preparing to say adios to Barcelona and the UEFA Cup. All that stood between the players and the exit door, it seemed, was a 15-minute Jim McLean team talk.
He didn't rant and rave. I think what he was emphasising to us at the time, what I remember was, if you get a goal here, they'll panic.
What I can remember about John Clark's goal is that I went down the left-hand side, got fouled.
And they simply haven't been able to cope with that.
Redford came out and took it with his left foot. I've attacked the front post. Clarkie's come in the middle of the goals and hammered it in.
As soon as John scored, they all seemed to be shouting at each other, the Barcelona players, and were arguing amongst themselves, and Gary Lineker was talking to somebody, one of our players, saying this mob will just chuck it, and really that's more or less what they did.
With the Catalans in disarray, United broke forward to seal a famous victory.
I had looked up and saw that they were a bit short and thought the best thing to do is try and pinpoint somebody in the middle of the goals, and Fergie peeled off at the back.
Tonight, Dundee United are through to the semi-finals of the UEFA Cup.
All of a sudden, I think people began to realise that our European run was not fluke, and I think that result showed that we were a good team.
John Holt was magnificent in that whole game, and I think he got Man of the Match award, and we got back into the room after it, and you know, it was an incredible feeling. You were lying there so high, and you couldn't believe the whole hysteria of the thing. And then John Holt said to me, you know, I'm thinking they're going to sign for Forfar.
And Jim just looked at me as if to say, are you mad? You're going from a top club, you know, Dundee United, who have just beaten Barcelona, and you're going to go part-time with Forfar. Get a grip.
That was typical of the people that we had in that particular squad who they didn't realise that they were the players that they were.
John Holt had come off McLean's youth conveyor belt along with Neri, Malpass and Gallagher. Having got hold of them as kids, McLean continued to treat them like teenagers, even when they were stars of European football.
Let's hear you shout.
Players in this team were kept in their place, and if you came in from another club, as Bowman, McInally and Ferguson did, you get treated just the same.
When it came to negotiations, you always spoke to you at a time when you were happy, and you were quite happy to re-sign, so he was clever.
Full stir-up. You sign these.
I always just sign the blank sheet of paper and let them fill it in. I did that with near enough all my contracts at Dundee United, so I didn't have a problem with it. I was quite happy to play at Dundee United. All my mates were playing for Dundee United.
Jim's theory was, and it's maybe reverting back to that now, that he would give them a small basic wage, sometimes just livable and no more, appearance money, so you had to fight to get your starting 11.
You played for your wage. If you didn't win for too many weeks, you felt it, and you struggled to pay the bills.
Rangers at the time were on something like £750 a week, but something like £28 a win, whereas Dundee United, we were on anything from £125 with a £600 bonus. So basically we were on the same money as Rangers, but we had to win the games.
It was hard for the lads who were out the team, but it gave them an incentive to get in the team, and that's what kept everybody on their toes and created the competition, which was really healthy for Dundee United at that time.
We socialised together. We had quite a number of parties. That was, you know, barbecues. Paul Sturrock was quite good at organising stuff like that, and I think he still does, looking at the size of him.
Funny enough, 2 years ago we all came back together, and now we're into the night out. We're all at it again, you know, giving stick to each other.
Paul Sturrock up front, he was called Luggy because he's got the biggest ears ever.
Kevin Gallagher was Skeletor because he was very thin.
Morris was Morris, but we used to just call him Miserable because he came for Fife.
My name was Flipper, Big Feet, you know.
There's loads of nicknames for Jim McLean, but I can't repeat them. They change on a daily and a weekly basis.
By April, whatever the team were calling wee Jim, United were in the semi-finals of the UEFA Cup, and they were drawn against one of the biggest names on the continent, in more ways than one, Borussia Mönchengladbach. In the first leg at Tannadice, United had plenty of chances, but the Germans celebrated after a 0-0 draw.
The Borussia Mönchengladbach players were going about the park as if they'd already won. And I think it suited us down to the ground, really, because we always knew that I think the basis of our success that year was scoring away from home.
Before the second leg in Germany, United won a place in the Scottish Cup final after defeating neighbours Dundee 3-2. Paul Hegarty scored the winner. Hegarty was actually a striker when he was signed from Hamilton in 1974, seen as a replacement for Andy Gray. But McLean saw something else and in a flash had transformed him into one of the most accomplished defenders in Britain. Just to round it off, he made him club captain. Meanwhile, the Mönchengladbach players were going six mad. They predicted half a dozen goals against United in the second leg.
I think they were overconfident, Borussia. I think they felt as though they had done the job at Tannadice. But they underestimated us.
Fergie scored, I think, a header back across from Eamon Bannon.
The chance is yes! Just Ferguson! And Dundee United have scored!
And then Ian Redford and Kevin Gallagher broke away late on in the game.
I thought actually for a second that he was going to try and score himself, and I remember thinking, if you do that and you miss, I'm going to kill you in the dressing room after the game. But fortunately he did the right thing and he squared it to me. And I remember that the goalkeeper committed himself very early.
There's Redford, yes!
And I just sort of popped it around the side of him and then just basically put it into an empty net.
The night of glory is completed by Ian Redford, and Jim McLean celebrates.
And it just shows you how good a team we were to beat two massive teams, two giants in Europe over a period of a month.
We were holding our own now, especially in European football, and I think that was fantastic for a small side, running a small budget with a small squad.
Life had never been better for United. They had become the first Scottish team to win a place in the UEFA Cup final. McLean might have served his time as a joiner, but now he was recognised as a master tactician, and his players as footballing craftsmen.
Everybody's raving about the 4-5-1. Well, we were playing 4-5-1 20 years ago.
We had players who could counter-attack. We had players who could hold the ball in midfield, who could pass. So, you know, and we were tight at the back. We kept it tight as a unit at the back, and then when we broke quickly. We broke with precision.
European teams could not handle it. They expected a nicey game where everybody passed the ball to each other and they crossed the halfway line and it got a wee bit quicker. We were in their face from when they threw it. We let them throw it out and then we were pounding down on them.
Perhaps the manager took the idea of pounding down on the opposition too literally, as his relationship with the Scottish media plumbed new depths. In 1988, a wee disagreement with a cameraman led to a court appearance in which he pled guilty to assault.
Well, I think you could say the press and Jim McLean were like chalk and cheese. Jim McLean would scour the papers every morning. If somebody wrote a bad article, I believe that he would call them up and tell them, don't bother coming in to the next press conference, or don't bother coming at the game on the Saturday.
I think he only wanted what was the best for Dundee United Football Club. He felt as though there was always favouritism to the West Coast.
Eventually, it was his relationship with the media, or lack of it, which signalled that the end was nigh. By 1993, his power at Tannadice was beginning to dilute, and after 21 years and 7 months, he quit as manager, although he did actually stay on as chairman. In 2000, he was forced to step down after swinging a punch at a BBC reporter during a post-match interview.
Well, you think I'm going to answer a stupid question like that?
I'm only asking it.
Well,
Could you
I told you earlier I wouldn't be answering it, and make sure that that's cut.
2 years later, he sold his shareholding in the club to Eddie Thompson and started writing a column for a tabloid. The column that packs a punch, they claim, without the slightest hint of irony. Meanwhile, back in May 1987, the United team faced 3 huge games in 2 massive finals. First up, they travelled to Sweden for the first leg of the UEFA Cup against Gothenburg and the normally bowling green-like surface of the Ullevi Stadium.
The pitch was the worst pitch I've ever played on in my whole football career, and I think the biggest disappointment of that whole European run was going to play a cup final in a pitch that was as bad as that.
So we'd gone from these superb, you know, beautiful pitches, Borussia and Barcelona, and we went to this, I don't know, they had the marching bands or a fair on the pitch.
I think Bruce Springsteen had a concert on it the week before.
It was a heavy rock band.
And some Swedish pop group, I don't know who they were.
Now, I'm not sure.
It was Bruce Springsteen had played a concert.
Van Halen or something.
But Rod Stewart springs to mind. I don't know.
Well, whatever the reason, the state of the pitch wasn't going to suit United's style of play.
I remember thinking it's going to be difficult to get the ball down and play a passing type game on this surface.
Anderson with it. Well, do we blame the pitch for it? That was an extraordinary bounce.
It was still all to play for, with the first leg finishing 1-0, and even McLean was quite pleased. Sandwiched between the UEFA Cup games was the Scottish Cup final against St Mirren. Now, Dundee United weren't very good at Scottish Cup finals. In fact, not to put too fine a point on it, they were rubbish. In 1974 they lost to Celtic, in 81 they were beaten by Rangers, and again lost to Celtic in 85. Catch my drift?
There was a lot made of the so-called Hampden hoodoo at that time. You know, United did have a reputation for going to Hampden and you know, coming away with the runners-up medals. But we certainly didn't feel that. I mean, we were very confident going into the cup final against St Mirren.
I'm a great believer when you go to cup finals like that, then it's about the players on the day, and you need a wee bit of luck on the day.
But in 1987, the smart money said they couldn't lose. Except this particular smart money must have cheated at his exams. At 0-0, the game went to extra time.
I can't remember who actually crossed the ball, but the ball kick crossed. I've gone for it. I've missed the ball and the momentum, actually. I remember being in a net.
And he's offside, no. The Dundee United players are complaining bitterly about that.
The referee pointed and gave the goal, and then the linesman chalked off, and it was for Kevin Gallagher in a seemingly offside position, lying face down in the middle of the goals, which today would never have stood.
And I think that was a massive turning point, because that's when I think the players' heads started to go down a little bit, and I think then St Mirren started taking the upper hand.
My namesake Ian Ferguson from St Mirren went up the other end of the park 2 minutes later and scored the winner.
Great run by Ferguson here, can he put it away out? And St Mirren are in the lead.
It was just complete mayhem after a game. It was like a league game. Jim McLean was going scatty because I think he thought as well that this would be our big chance to win the Scottish Cup. He'd been disappointed so often.
We've lost a cup final, but we couldn't sit for 2 or 3 months moping on it, waiting for the next season. We had 3 days to get over it and go for another cup final, which was even bigger.
After the Hampden defeat, they had to somehow lift themselves for the second leg against Gothenburg. Incredibly, it was their 67th match of the season. Still a Scottish record for competitive games played.
Jim couldn't afford the luxury of leaving players out, you know, and spelling them for other games, because every game, the next game was becoming more important than the next game, and it was, you know, so we needed our strongest team. And at that time we just didn't have enough players.
Gothenburg had just come back from their mid-season break, and I think they were 6 or 7 games into that season, and they were a good team, they were a fresh team.
Tannadice was packed to the absolute gunnels. I mean, you couldn't have got any more people in there.
The left-hand side was all the Gothenburg fans. The shed end at Tannadice was heaving, and they were just singing and chanting. The atmosphere, I think there was only 20,000 in there, but it sounded like 100,000.
Trailing 1-0 from the first leg, United had to attack a well-organised Gothenburg and hope for an early breakthrough.
There's Ian Ferguson! Well, you can't come much closer than that. I played in the left wing against Gothenburg. I played centre forward over there and then left wing at home again. And they were just queuing up for me. There was 2 banks of 4, you just couldn't break them down.
A massive memory is that we missed a real good chance in the first few minutes where, I mean, it was I think it was Billy Kirkwood.
Urgent opening by Dundee United. There's Gallagher. That's towards Kirkwood.
And I was screaming at him to square it to me, and he shot, and it just narrowly went past. I mean, that goes in, could change the whole context of the game. They, on the other hand, hit us on the break and scored a goal. As soon as they scored the goal, you then realised that we had to score 3.
And that's the goal which United were dreading. Lennart Nilsson.
Despite the size of this task, such was the spirit of McLean's men, they weren't going to give up without a fight.
Good play from Clark. And there's the equaliser.
John Clark's goal levelled the score on the night, and the team briefly spluttered into action. But United's tank was empty, and it was Gothenburg that lifted the UEFA Cup.
On his feet, and there goes the whistle, relief for the Swedish bench.
Just unfortunate we didn't get the result away from home that we normally did in Europe. So I think that killed us more than anything, but it was probably a partly they did to us what we had done to Barcelona and Borussia Mönchengladbach.
There were tears before bedtime. Tears of disappointment and tears of frustration at yet another loser's medal. For the second time in 5 days, this team had swapped football for the crying game.
I remember briefly Glenn Hussein coming up to me and just lifting me up and just saying, "Wee man, just wipe the tears away, because hopefully there'll be plenty more times for you."
Disappointed. It was like a death in the family. It was.
The older you get as a player, you realise that it'll probably not happen again, and that was upsetting.
You quickly realise that, you know, this is a loser's medal that you'll keep. You know, because every loser's medal that I got, I used to just throw them as far away as I could, you know, because it was so disappointing.
You get that close to the cup and you can't touch it. You can't hold it or anything. I mean, you've just got to walk by it.
Both United and winners Gothenburg were given a standing ovation. At that time, English clubs were banned from Europe because of hooliganism. And in stark contrast, Dundee United supporters were later awarded FIFA's first ever Fair Play Award.
The fans were just unbelievable after the game. Both sets of fans clapped to both teams. Both teams run round the pitch.
They were a total credit to Scotland, credit to football, really. And I think it's only right that they won the Fair Play Award.
I think Dundee United received £20,000, and off the £20,000 they built a new stand, which was called the Fair Play Award.
It had been a magnificent season. United had become the first Scottish team ever to reach the UEFA Cup final. Along the way, they had humbled the footballing superpower of Barcelona, both at home and away. And yet, Dundee United had won the square root of hee-haw.
By the end of that season, we had nothing. I'm saying, so that was a bit gut-wrenching, but I think we went away disappointed but content that we had had a fantastic season.
It was almost like the end of that Dundee United era, that great Dundee United era, where, you know, we can look back now, you know, virtually 20 years further down the line and realise it was almost like a watershed for the club.
Many of McLean's 86-87 team have gone on to enjoy more success in football. Paul Sturrock spent time in the Tannadice hot seat himself before forging a successful management career in England, first with Plymouth and latterly with Sheffield Wednesday. Maurice Malpass and John Holt both spent time on the coaching staff at Tannadice. Holt left to become part of Celtic's youth setup, and Malpass went on to become Terry Butcher's assistant at Motherwell. Kevin Gallagher had a hugely successful playing career in the Premiership with Blackburn and Newcastle before becoming a radio pundit. Jim McInally worked in youth development at Celtic before trying his hand at management with Morton. Ian Ferguson went on to deny United another cup victory in 1991. He scored for Motherwell, and now runs a football memorabilia stall in a Glasgow market. But wherever their careers have taken them, none of them has come across anyone quite like wee Jim McLean.
Jim McLean in 3 words.
In 3 words?
Coach. Ahead of his time, so it's like 4.
A great manager.
Excellent in tactics and coaching.
Genius.
A hard man.
A maniac.
Best manager that I worked with.
Can you swear?
And a football pervert.
Absolute fucking bumpo.